What if the man you pass every day, the one pushing a mop wearing a janitor's uniform, was actually a genius? What if he spoke not one, not two, but 9 languages fluently? That's exactly what happened inside a busy corporate office, when a billionaire CEO overheard something that would flip his entire company upside down and change one man's life forever. The office was buzzing with the usual noise, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, heels tapping across the shiny floors as employees hurried to meetings. It was just another ordinary morning, or so everyone thought. But then, something unusual broke the rhythm. Mr. Daniels, the CEO of the company, was striding down the hallway, his mind already occupied with back-to-back meetings and international calls. He rarely paid attention to the small details of the office. After all, as the boss, his world revolved around big decisions, profits and deals. Yet that morning, he stopped. From the lobby below, he heard voices. Not just voices, languages. Words flowing smoothly, elegantly, in a tone that caught his ear. He paused near the balcony overlooking the reception area, curiosity sparking. Down below, Miguel, the janitor in his faded blue uniform, was leaning on his mop while speaking rapid, fluent French to a confused visitor. The man's stressed face suddenly relaxed, his shoulders loosening as Miguel calmly gave him directions. The relief was obvious. The visitor was finally understood. Daniels blinked, unsure if his ears were playing tricks on him. Did I just hear my janitor speaking French? Before he could even wrap his head around it, the lobby doors swung open. A delivery worker entered, carrying packages and speaking hurriedly in Mandarin, clearly struggling to communicate with the receptionist. Without hesitation, Miguel turned toward him and replied, this time in perfect Mandarin. His voice was steady, confident, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The delivery man's face lit up with gratitude, nodding eagerly as Miguel translated with ease. The CEO's jaw nearly dropped. The entire scene unfolded so casually, yet it was extraordinary. Employees nearby started whispering, stealing glances. It wasn't every day that a janitor revealed he could switch languages like a diplomat. By now, Daniels wasn't just surprised. He was fascinated. He descended the stairs slowly, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floor. The crowd grew quiet, sensing his presence. Miguel, still gripping his mop, suddenly looked nervous as the tall figure of the CEO approached. Daniels stopped right in front of him. Miguel, he said in a calm but commanding tone, how many languages do you know? The janitor shifted uncomfortably. His hands trembled slightly, tightening on the handle of the mop. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. 9, sir, he admitted. Then after a pause, he lowered his gaze and added, but it's nothing important. A hush fell over the lobby. Employees nearby gasped, some covering their mouths in disbelief. 9 languages? Was that even possible? To them, Miguel had always been invisible, the quiet janitor who came in early, cleaned up silently, and left without anyone really noticing. But in that moment, he wasn't invisible anymore. Daniel studied him carefully, his sharp eyes narrowing in thought. This was no ordinary man. Something about Miguel's modesty, his hidden brilliance, and the sheer scale of his gift struck Daniels to his core. And for the first time in years, the CEO felt something he hadn't expected to feel inside his own company: awe. News spread through the office like wildfire. By lunchtime, whispers floated from cubicle to cubicle, and curious glances followed Miguel everywhere he went. The janitor, who had always blended into the background, was suddenly the center of attention. Some employees were amazed, their voices filled with admiration. Did you hear him? He spoke German better than our international partners, one secretary whispered. I had no idea, another said. Imagine knowing 9 languages. But others were skeptical, even dismissive. Come on, a manager scoffed, shaking his head. If he's really that talented, why is he mopping floors? People don't waste skills like that unless there's something wrong. The contrast was sharp, half the office buzzing with respect, the other half mocking the idea. But one man wasn't laughing. Mr. Daniels couldn't stop thinking about it. All through his meetings that afternoon, the image of Miguel confidently speaking in French and Mandarin kept replaying in his mind. A janitor with such knowledge? There had to be a story behind it. That evening, long after most of the employees had gone home, Daniels sent for Miguel. The janitor entered the CEO's office nervously, wiping his calloused hands on his faded uniform. His eyes darted to the expensive furniture, the leather chairs, the city lights glowing through the massive windows. He looked out of place and he knew it. Daniels motioned for him to sit. "Miguel," he said gently, "tell me the truth. How did you learn so many languages?" Miguel hesitated. For a moment he considered brushing the question aside, but something about Daniels' tone felt genuine. Slowly he lowered himself into the chair. His eyes softened, though his voice trembled. "Years ago," Miguel began, "I was a teacher. I taught Spanish, French, and a little bit of German. But languages were more than just a job for me. They were my passion. I used to dream of traveling the world, maybe even writing books one day. Every new word I learned felt like opening a door to another life." He paused, his gaze falling to the floor. But life had other plans. Daniels leaned forward, listening intently. Miguel's hands clenched in his lap. "My wife became sick. The hospital bills were crushing. I sold everything I could. I stopped teaching because the salary wasn't enough. I took any work I could find, cleaning, fixing, anything that paid. And when she passed away," his voice cracked, tears threatening to fall. "When she passed away, I stopped chasing dreams. I just survived." The room fell silent. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening. Daniels leaned back in his chair, stunned. Before him wasn't just a janitor. It was a man who had once been full of ambition, knowledge, and love, but who had sacrificed everything for the woman he loved. For the first time in a long while, the powerful CEO felt humbled. He realized he was speaking not to an employee who cleaned floors, but to a man who had endured heartbreak and carried untold brilliance quietly in the shadows. And in that moment, Daniels knew Miguel's story was only just beginning. The next morning, Daniels woke up with an idea that refused to leave his mind. He had hardly slept the night before, replaying Miguel's confession again and again. A man who spoke 9 languages deserved more than whispers in the hallways. He deserved to be seen. By mid-morning, Daniels called an urgent meeting. The senior managers, usually only summoned for million-dollar discussions, gathered in the polished conference room, murmuring among themselves. They expected numbers, charts, or strategy updates. Instead, they found Miguel standing awkwardly near the corner, holding his mop as if he didn't belong. Daniels walked in last, his presence commanding silence. With a faint smile tugging at his lips, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, today you'll see something extraordinary." The managers exchanged confused glances. Daniels motioned toward Miguel. "This is Miguel, the man many of you pass by every day without noticing. Yesterday, I discovered something remarkable about him, and today I want you to see it for yourselves." He nodded toward one of the executives. "Mr. Hoffman, you speak German, don't you?" The man straightened, then smirked slightly as if this were some kind of joke. "Yeah," he replied, switching to German. He rattled off a sentence, fast and complex, testing the janitor's limits. Without hesitation, Miguel answered back, in fluent, confident German. Not only correct, but polished with the rhythm of a native speaker. Hoffman's smirk vanished, replaced with wide-eyed surprise. A murmur spread through the room. "Impressive," Daniels said smoothly. "Let's try another." He pointed to another manager who spoke Arabic. The man leaned forward and launched into a string of phrases sharp and challenging. Miguel responded instantly, his voice calm and measured. The executive sat back in disbelief, whispering, "Perfect. Not a single mistake." One by one, they tested him. Russian, Japanese, Italian, languages from every corner of the globe. Miguel met each challenge head-on, his responses flawless. His tone carried not just words, but the culture behind them, as if he'd lived in each of those places himself. Gasps filled the room. Some leaned forward, fascinated, while others simply shook their heads, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Even the toughest executives, men and women who prided themselves on never being impressed, sat in stunned silence. Finally, Daniels raised his hand, bringing the room to order. His voice was calm but carried weight. "We spend millions hiring translators and consultants every year. And yet the most talented man in this building, the man with skills that could save us time, money, and reputation, has been cleaning our floors." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't disbelief anymore. It was respect. All eyes turned to Miguel. He shifted uncomfortably, staring down at the table, embarrassed by the sudden attention. He wasn't used to being the center of anything. For years he had lived in the background, invisible. Now every powerful gaze in the room was fixed on him. Daniels let the moment hang before stepping closer. His voice softened, but his words carried through the silence. This company prides itself on finding talent. But what good is that if we can't recognize the brilliance standing right in front of us? The managers lowered their heads, ashamed. Miguel swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly. But inside, a spark of hope flickered, the kind of hope he thought he'd lost forever. And Daniels, watching him closely, knew this was just the beginning. That afternoon, Daniels made a decision that would ripple through the entire company. He called for an emergency meeting in the main hall, something he rarely did. When word spread, curiosity surged like electricity. Employees poured in from every department, whispering to one another, trying to guess what could be so urgent. The vast hall buzzed with energy. Some expected new business plans, others feared budget cuts. But when Daniels appeared on stage, he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was Miguel, still dressed in his janitor's uniform, standing awkwardly under the glare of the lights. Confusion spread. Phones came out instantly. Cameras flashed as people began recording. What was the CEO doing with the janitor? Daniels gripped the podium, his expression calm but serious. He let the murmurs settle before speaking. His voice carried across the hall, steady and commanding. "I want to share a story with all of you," he began. The room hushed. For years we've walked past a man who kept this building clean, day after day without asking for recognition. Most of us never stopped to really see him. But yesterday I discovered something extraordinary. He turned, gesturing toward Miguel. What none of us knew is that Miguel here can speak 9 languages. 9? Gasps erupted, followed by a wave of astonished murmurs. A few employees even laughed in disbelief until they saw the sincerity on Daniel's face. "Yes," Daniels continued firmly. "You heard me correctly. This man has been working quietly, carrying the kind of talent most of us could only dream of. Yet life pushed him into the shadows. But today," his voice rose, filled with conviction, "that ends." The hall grew silent again, every eye fixed on the CEO and the janitor. Daniel stepped closer to Miguel and rested a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "From today forward," he declared, "Miguel will no longer be our janitor. He will be our new head of international communications." For a heartbeat there was silence, like the entire room had stopped breathing. Then the hall erupted. Applause thundered through the space. People stood to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even whistling. Employees who had once ignored Miguel were now filming him, applauding him, celebrating him. The noise grew so loud it echoed against the walls. Miguel's eyes filled with tears. His throat tightened as he looked out at the sea of faces, faces that for years had never looked back at him. Now they were cheering his name. He pressed a trembling hand against his chest, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't just a shadow pushing a mop down empty hallways. He was seen, recognized, and honored. Daniels leaned in and whispered so only Miguel could hear, "This is just the beginning." And as the applause roared on, Miguel realized something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope was alive again. Weeks later, the office looked the same on the outside. Desks, laptops, and meetings, but inside something had shifted. Miguel was no longer the quiet janitor sweeping the corners unnoticed and forgotten. He now sat at his own desk in a crisp shirt and tie with a small plaque that read, "Head of International Communications." Instead of pushing a mop, he pushed ideas. Instead of being ignored, he was now sought after. International clients greeted him with warmth and respect, impressed not only by his language skills but also by his ability to bridge cultural gaps with ease. Deals that once dragged on for months were now closing in weeks. Partners from around the world praised the company's newfound efficiency. But for Daniels, the real victory wasn't just in numbers. It was in watching Miguel transform before his very eyes. The man who once lowered his head in embarrassment now walked tall through the office, his confidence radiating. Colleagues who had once brushed past him in hallways now stopped to shake his hand, ask his advice, or simply smile. Miguel's story had become a symbol of hope, not just for him but for everyone who worked there. One afternoon, Daniels organized a company-wide event in the main hall. The stage was the same, the crowd familiar, but the atmosphere was different. This time, people weren't there out of curiosity. They were there to celebrate. Daniel stepped up to the podium, Miguel standing proudly beside him, though still with his trademark humility. The CEO's voice carried through the room. calm but powerful. Talent doesn't always wear a suit, he began, scanning the audience. Brilliance isn't always loud. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the people we overlook every day. He paused, glancing at Miguel with a smile. For years we passed by this man without realizing the extraordinary gift he carried. But Miguel reminded us of something important, that respect, kindness, and opportunity can change not just a life, but an entire company. The hall erupted in applause. This time there were no gasps of disbelief, only pride and admiration. Employees clapped until their hands ached, some even wiping tears from their eyes. Miguel bowed his head slightly, a humble smile spreading across his face. He had never asked for recognition, never demanded attention, yet now he stood as an example for all. Word of his journey traveled beyond the company walls. News outlets picked up the story. The janitor who spoke 9 languages. Social media lit up with comments praising Daniels for recognizing hidden talent and celebrating Miguel's resilience. Strangers across the city felt inspired, realizing that greatness can lie within anyone, no matter their job title, background, or uniform. For Miguel, it was more than a new role. It was a new life. He no longer lived in the shadows of grief and hardship. Instead, he walked forward with purpose, carrying not just his skills but his story as a beacon for others. And so, the tale of the janitor who spoke 9 languages became more than just office gossip. It became a reminder whispered in boardrooms, classrooms, and homes that true greatness often hides in the most unexpected places, waiting for someone to see it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.